What's up, viewers? So today I've got something a little bit different for you guys. I got a review of a first-person shooter. It's called Beyond the Wire, and it's set in World War I. The game just released on early access on Steam about 2 weeks ago. So the game is supposed to be a historically accurate sort of World War I milsim, where you have 50 versus 50 battles and trenches. And it features historically accurate weapons from that era, so you're going to have mainly bolt-action rifles, snipers, planted machine guns, you've got tear gas, you got mustard gas, you got all that good stuff that you would find in a normal World War I game. You can play as 3 different factions at the moment in its current early access. You've got French, American, or German. So for people who are familiar with games like Postscriptum and Hell Let Loose, even Squad, you're going to be very familiar with this game because it's actually based on the same OWI core engine as Postscriptum and Squad. So the mechanics feel somewhat similar. I mean, I wouldn't say they're exactly the same. This is actually not made by the same developers though as Squad and Postscriptum. It's made by its own studio called Redstone Interactive, and this is actually their first game as a company. So first of all, before we actually go into any details about the game and what I liked about the game, what I disliked about the game, I'm first going to talk about the elephant in the room, and that is the early access tag. Okay, we all know that early access, if you've played PC games, early access can be a bit of a weird one. So developers will release a game in early access to try and make money from a game that is typically unfinished, or it's still its very early stages of development. The vast majority of early access games never really come out of early access. They kind of just stay there and just have that game as a cash crop or try to milk it for what it's worth. Although there are some mainly games like Rust and Subnautica, just to name a couple, but there definitely have been some games that have come out of early access where developers have put time and effort into completing a game that came out in a very unfinished state. This game is very, very early access. It's got some poor optimization on PC. I'm running it on a 2080 Ti at 1440p, and I usually get around 50 to 60 FPS. Sometimes more if I'm not in an area where there are a lot of players to render. But, on a 2080 Ti, that's not particularly fantastic. So first of all, let's discuss what the game actually does well. So the maps, I think they're a great size. Unlike Squad and Postscriptum, if you've played those games, the maps are quite enormous, so you're not really encountering players that often. It feels like you're kind of just running around looking for combat a lot of the times, and there can be some big lulls, and the pacing is quite slow. The mechanics in this game are pretty easy to pick up. I mean, you aim, you shoot. There's a lean using QE, which I think really works well in trenches when you're trying to square off against people. Being able to lean around a corner, shoot down a trench, I think that's a system that works quite well in itself. For an indie game, the character models look good, the animations are quite clean, but where the game really shines in particular is in its close quarters melee system. So when you're pushing trenches, it can be exhilarating and nerve-wracking at the same time. The melee system is similar to games like Chivalry and Mordhau. It's got an omnidirectional melee system, so you swing your sword in the direction of where you click your mouse. It means you can swing your sword in a 360-degree angle. That can be a lot of fun when you're pushing trenches, especially if you've played games like Mordhau and are quite familiar with that sort of omnidirectional melee system. Now, moving on from that, what I really think is also a lot of fun about this game is actually pushing trenches with your teammates. So when you're calling out enemy locations, when you're reviving each other with medics, that's when the game really shines, because teamwork, coordination is a big part of this game. When you've got guns that can only fire one bullet at a time and then you have to reload, you've really got to rely on your teammates to be able to shoot and support you while you're reloading. And when you have the right team around you, it can be incredibly gratifying. Now, those are things I like about the game. That's not to say that there aren't a lot of things I dislike about the game. There are still a lot of things in this game that I think could be changed, could be improved on, or could be removed altogether. The first thing we're going to discuss is that it's something that's quite a big deal for anybody that's trying to buy a game in early access, is the player counts. The player counts in this game is not particularly high. On its peak on Steam, you'll see that it probably has around 1,000 players playing at once, which is not great for a game just starting out in early access, which means that, at odd hours of the day, you're probably not going to find a game that has any players in it. Another talking point, another thing that I don't love too much about the game is the actual mechanics themselves. I feel like the mechanics are really clunky. Your character feels heavy. When you're crouching, it takes a lot of time to crouch. When you're going prone, it takes a long time to prone. I understand that like they're trying to add some realism to the game, and it is based on that same OWI core engine that Squad and Postscriptum are based off of, which are also quite slow games. But sometimes I feel myself trying to run away from a grenade that I can see is being thrown in front of me, but because my character takes 35 minutes to run away, it feels like I'm dragging a piano behind me. I end up blowing up to that grenade even though I knew it was being thrown in the first place. This kind of makes the game feel really slow overall. And I don't know, I feel like they could maybe make those animations a little faster, make the game feel a little bit more dynamic. But if you like games like Squad and Postscriptum, if you like that slow playstyle, then maybe this is for you. Maybe this is the game that you actually will enjoy. Another problem is that at a distance, when you're looking at enemy players, it's hard to tell if they're an enemy or a friend. If they're friendly, their actual name tag will usually pop up above their heads, but you have to make sure that your crosshair is directly on them, otherwise you won't be able to see that. So when you're just starting out, you will end up getting a lot of team kills just because it's hard to get used to putting your crosshair directly on that enemy player to make sure that he isn't a friendly. Sometimes you just will instinctively shoot your own teammate. It'll happen. Once you get used to the uniforms after playing for a few hours, it's not so bad. But I feel like they could allow your teammates' nameplates to pop up a little bit sooner before you have your crosshair directly on them. Also, another thing, the maps themselves, the skyboxes are really quite gray, so all the maps have the same feel to them. Some of them are trenches, some of them are, you know, out in the open, but they all have the same feel because of this gray skybox. I know the game is trying to simulate, you know, that World War I feel where everyone was dying and it was kind of grim, but at the same time I feel like some varied weather could add a little more sort of variety to the game. You know, a little bit of change of pace from that gray weather I think would be great. Now, the stamina bar. Okay, this is something I haven't discussed earlier, but the stamina bar for me is one of the most annoying things in this game. When you try to sprint from one objective to the other, your stamina bar will deplete quite quickly, and it means that you can't do actions like meleeing, using your bayonet, even aiming down sights can be slow, and you can't really run. It takes quite a while for your stamina bar to regen, and I feel like for a game that has, you know, kind of a lot of running around in trenches, maybe that stamina bar could be a little bit, you know, it could maybe drain a little slower, or it could sort of regen a little bit quicker. I think that would be a solution to that. So, moving on to this, should you play this game? That's the big question everyone's going to be asking here. Should you play this game? Well, if you liked games like Squad, Postscriptum, you know, more than games like Hell Let Loose or Red Orchestra, which are a bit more arcade and less sort of simcade, then you might like this game. You know, it's not a full-on World War I sim where you're just sitting around dying of trench foot and fighting off rats with a bat, but it does sort of bring you that World War I immersion you're looking for if you're a history buff. I personally prefer games like Hell Let Loose and Red Orchestra because, you know, they're more simcade games. They're more arcadey than that. They make you feel a little bit more like you're actually sort of a strong soldier as opposed to just being another foot soldier getting blended in the grinder of World War I. Which, you know, for me, I personally like being able to run around faster. I like a lighter mechanic. I like a slightly floatier mechanic where your character doesn't feel so heavy. But that's, you know, that's personal preference. That's purely subjective. So who knows? You might like this game. If you like the idea of a game set during World War I, then this also might be the game for you. If you have a lower end PC, however, then I can't recommend the game to you until it's been further optimized, you know, maybe in a few months down the line, maybe even a year down the line, if they continue development on it. So you guys can take this review with a pinch of salt because it is just my personal opinion of the game. I think there's a lot of things that the game could do better. There's a lot of things that I hope that the devs decide to, you know, improve on to make the game a little bit more fun. But to be honest, if the player count doesn't go up anytime soon, then it could be one of these early access games that's dead in the water. I hope not, because, you know, I had some fun playing in the 10 or 12 hours or so that I played. I did enjoy some aspects of it, and I think the teamwork is a lot of fun. Anyway, if you guys enjoy the video, please do me a favor, leave a like. I enjoyed making this as my first review. I'll be making a lot more reviews like this, especially of FPS games. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you didn't enjoy the video, leave a dislike. It gives me an idea of how well I'm doing with these videos. And I appreciate you guys watching to the end, and you guys enjoy the rest of your day.